Hey everyone, welcome to Get Real with Tiff and Carl. I'm Carl Rabun.
I'm Tiffany Salcido.
This is our first edition of this podcast, so we're super excited to be here. We've been working on this for a few months. It's just something, that we both been looking forward to, and it's interesting how it kind of came about, right? And I think did I send you something on Instagram, something silly on Instagram? Silly
Yeah.
stuff. I'm a dad. I'm a dad. I send dad jokes and.
Well, they're my dad jokes. My dad would tell jokes like that. So I resonate.
And I knew Tiffany would receive them, right? So I guess we probably should go through our bio a little bit, huh? Right. So been you know, uh, in the work world, customer service for, hundreds of years by now, right? But I think Tiffany and we've been connected at least for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
I was thinking, yeah, and we both worked for a training organization at a University of California campus, and our backgrounds are in human services. So we both have spent a lot of time training social workers and eligibility staff and human service professionals up and down the state. We've done a lot of traveling. We've done a lot of virtual these last few
Mhm.
years. We've also had a few connections on during institutes where we've co-facilitated opening and closing sessions, and so you know I we always seem to connect and get along, and I think that was the beginnings of thinking about this is something that would be fun to do. I know whenever I go into a county, usually there's somebody if they're talking about, oh, the person who was there last week, they were so funny. I said, oh, was that Tiffany? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. She was great. She had so much information. I said, yeah, I know. She's a hard act to follow. So thanks for letting me know I'm following her, right? And so,
You're too
that
nice.
that well, but I know that's something that going into different counties, and we've had different organizations ask for our training specifically, and I think a lot of it is because well, my feeling, is that we have conversations that are real and experiential, right? We've both been case managers, we've both been supervisors, we both worked in the human services and social work world, and so um, I know I tell a lot of stories, and I know you tell a lot of stories, and so I think that really it resonates with people as far as I can tell, and I don't know, what do you think?
I agree. A lot of times when you get into like the training realm, it's so theoretical in nature that, it's good information, but people can't necessarily apply it to their work, which to me is a failure in training. So if people can't take the information from the class and apply it and make their work life better, then as a trainer, I feel like I have failed them. So, as much as I can bring it back to real life, I try to do so. And interestingly enough, I apply a lot of the stories to how it applies in my family. This has helped me have a better relationship with my spouse. This has helped me navigate parenting a little bit easier, and all of the mistakes. I'm a huge fan of telling the stories of when I've gotten it wrong, which I've got so many of them, and how I've kind of learned to give people hope that if you put the right amount of effort into it and you're willing to adapt and change, that you can grow and other things are possible. And so I think that's the connection for people, is that I do show up as my authentic self, which on some days is a hot mess in a dumpster fire. But it's who I am, and I don't try to fake it and be somebody that I'm not. And I think people really do see that, and I see them as well. I want people to feel like they
Yeah,
can be their most authentic self and know that they're safe. And I think that's the connection that I have with people.
yeah, no, absolutely. I was in a class a couple months ago, and somebody walked. I said, I felt like we were in a therapy session, your therapy session. And I mean, yeah, I guess I'm uber vulnerable, right? I'll
Right.
tell stories of successes, but also failures and lessons learned,
Right.
and just to be real. I mean, that's why the name of the podcast is Get Real, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of both of our superpowers when it comes to connecting with people. Is just they know what they're going to get from somebody, right? So whether they like it or not, that's what they're going to get, right?
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
I remember I had a response in a county one time where there was 5 or 6 people saying, "Wow, I really like his stories," and they really connected with us. And then there was one person who wrote, "Does he have to talk the whole time? Do I have to hear all his stories?" Which
Hilarious.
you had a point. And then it also helped me to recognize that no, I don't have to talk all the time, right? So it
Mhm.
allowed me
Mhm.
to be more facilitative, but still be real at the same time. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. It's
interesting.
finding that balance. Definitely finding that balance.
Yeah. So all the experience, both of us, I guess, combined is probably, pushing 30 years experience in the training realm. And I just passed 20 years experience working with human service professionals. So, and as a human service professional. So it's, hopefully as we connect and put forth different episodes, you'll hear our tips, our experience, um, as professionals, as human service professionals, as training professionals, as parents, as spouses, as people trying to navigate this crazy world. Um, and you'll see how real it gets. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And we'll always tell you the truth, even when it hurts, even when it hurts. I think that's the
yeah,
real part for me. I think that's the piece for me that I really resonate with is I really try to challenge the status quo of what we're doing, right? I don't like change for the sake of change. Like I'll be really honest with you.
yeah.
If what
Most
we're
people don't.
doing is
Yeah.
working, yeah. If what you're doing or what I'm doing is working and you're getting what you want, then you're doing it right. Like don't change. But if you're not getting
Mhm.
the results that you want and you're not getting the outcomes and you don't have the relationships that you want to have, like peel back the curtain and look at that and say, well, what can I do differently? And how can I kind of get over myself and grow, grow? And so I really like to challenge that this is the way it's always been done type of mentality to say, okay, if it's not serving you anymore, let it go, right? Which is sometimes very challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, just letting it go. That's what you've known. It's
Hmm. Yeah.
easier said than done, right? So that's cool. So yeah, you'll probably see some of our own self-discovery as we move forward in this too. So
Always a work in progress.
always, always
Always.
growth mentality.
Yep.
So, before we were talking about before the podcast started, we always connect if we haven't seen each other in a while. We were just
Hmm.
talking about our different travels, as working trainers, as folks who, I'd say right now, I don't know. If somebody asked me this the other day, I'd say probably about 70-75% of my classes are in person again, right? Which has steadily grown to that point as we've come from the other side of the pandemic, right? And have those in-person classes anymore. What are you experiencing?
I'm probably at about 90%, to be
Wow.
honest with you. I have been on the road nonstop since January. Every single week since January, I have been somewhere else except for my house.
Hmm.
Everywhere but my house, with a few virtual days sprinkled here and there.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I have been in person in the field doing the work and all of the fun that comes with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've maybe been a little, I don't want to say, I don't know if it's fortunate or not, but a lot of my couple of the people I work for are still um banking on a lot of the virtual world, right? And so, last week I had 5 classes and they're all from home. And this week I actually just drove to downtown where I live in Sacramento. And
Yeah.
but then the rest of the stuff I did was virtual, including my coaching sessions that I had with folks. And so, but yeah, next week I'm on the road for 4 days and 5 days. And then the week after that, I'm on the road for 4 days. And so, yeah, I hear you. It
Yeah.
doesn't stop.
Last week I put in 60 hours because I tracked my time last week. 60 hours and 1,300 miles
Wow.
was my time last week. So um
Mm.
but I get a lot. I mean, it's exhausting physically, but I really love the in-person like energy. I get the same type of energy in virtual, but I think it's different when you're in person. I try to set the tone I always have some music on, like during breaks and during discussions, and you know try to help people be really comfortable. We have great discussions, and again, really good energy, and that's sometimes harder to duplicate in the virtual environment. Not impossible,
Mhm.
but just a little different. So I
Yeah,
really like being in person. It's the getting there that, that I'm not in love with. It's
it's
that part of it, especially since it's not like I'm in one location for a week. I'm like, I go from this place to this place to that place, back to this place, back to this place, and then I got to go home. And it does definitely wear and tear
brings it
on
out.
this old lady body. I start to feel it in my soul after a period of time. And so I'm actually really looking forward to the end of this fiscal year because I get a whole week break that I can just exist as a human being. And I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah,
Wow, a week break.
I know. It's
Oh,
luxurious.
shocking.
Yeah, I'm going to take a lavish vacation to my house where I
Yeah.
sleep in my bed. And I don't know, I might even get a little wild and actually go buy some groceries, which is one
Wow.
of the challenges of being on the road is I never have food in my house because I'm never here. So the couple days I am home, it's like, what do I eat? I'm tired of eating out. I want to eat at my house, but if I go buy food, it's all going to spoil. It's just really it's a lifestyle choice, I guess.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in my freezer that it's yeah, I need to well, I was home, like I said, the last couple weeks, and
Yeah.
yesterday I didn't have anything, and my wife said, "Are you teaching today, or do you have any meetings?" I said, "No, there's nothing on my schedule." She goes, "Well," I said, "Why? What do you have in mind?" So we went to Green Acres, or which is like our, and
Good.
then we went to Lowe's, and I'm going to Home Depot.
Sounds beautiful. That's like that my
Yep.
ideal day. If you
Right.
throw Costco into that, you got me. You got me.
Costco was on the list. We didn't get there.
Oh, love Costco.
But
That's
I
for
did
me a
get a
good
Sam's
day.
Club membership as well, and I haven't gone in there to renew it, so it's just sitting there. I need to take care of that. But anyways,
Get your life
so
together, Carl.
I know. I always kept saying if I have just a day or two, there's so much I would do, and yeah, no, no, we got a puppy, so it just adds to it. So
Oh, I love puppies.
yeah, they're cool. They're cool. This one's a little energetic, which is fine. So
It's a puppy. Oh, it'll chill out.
yeah. So any fun and interesting things happen in your
Yes,
training this week,
of
or
course, always, always.
yeah,
But one particular thing stood out to me, and I've been teaching this class on customer service in this county for a while. I did it for one group, and they really liked it, so they wanted to expand it to another department, which we did. And it's just a little half day class. It's customer service, nothing super intense or anything like that. But the perspective I try to take on that is not just about like customer service tips, like, smile when you're on the phone. I don't do that kind of stuff, but really
you know, when,
thinking
when I
about, yeah,
when I smile on the phone, I sound like this, right? No, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
it doesn't
So
work.
I avoid like that kind of discussion. But what I really do think about, what I talk a lot about is like impact and purpose and why we're here and who we help and why it's important for us to be compassionate and empathetic and all those things. So um I as an instructor, I practice what I preach. And so come as you are. I'm going to be real patient. I'm going to be compassionate. And part of that is sometimes people come in with their laptops. And even though we're in person and we're in a training, people are working and I leave them alone. And I leave them alone because I recognize that people have bigger things in life than just my training, right? Like they maybe have a deadline. I don't know what's going on in their life, and honestly, it's none of my
Right.
business. And so,
Mhm.
as long as they're not being disruptive and distracting other people, I just leave people alone. And they participate, they have discussions, they look up, they're paying attention, they're just multitasking in the way that they have accustomed to deal with, you know, the
Yeah.
reality of their workday. And so I had a manager in that particular class, and she was a newer manager. I've known her from other things, and we're pretty friendly. And she came to me at break, and she's like, "I notice a lot of people on their laptops, and I think that's really disrespectful." And I said, "I don't find it disrespectful, not even in the slightest." She's like, well, do you want me to make an announcement and tell them all to shut their laptops so they can pay attention to you? And I said, no, not at all. They're not being disrespectful to me. They're not being disrespectful to the people next to them. They're 100% engaged. I can see everybody's faces. They're looking, they're listening, they're nodding their heads, they're, talking to their neighbors. That they're not doing anything that I think needs to be addressed. And she's like, well, I just find it completely disrespectful. And I said, well, I hope you can work with that. I don't know what to tell you
Yeah.
because honestly, if I had to guess, the reason that they're still working while they're in training is because they have like pressure from management to perform. And they can't afford to take 3.5 hours away from their workday and still have the same level of performance. And so they're really like doing the best they can with what they have. And as an adult to an adult, I respect their decision. I respect their decision because they know what their priorities far more than I do. And I think that's where the disconnect in leadership, and this is something, you and I talk about different leadership styles and how to lead and when to lead. I mean, there's no one perfect way, but in that particular instance, I think if that leader had really tapped into, let me be a bit more curious about why people are still on their laptops versus they're being disrespectful to the instructor, which again, I wasn't disrespected. I didn't feel disrespected at all. To say why if we're giving them 3.5 hours of development to go, and my classes are fun. We have a good time. So if they can't disconnect to go have a learning experience instead of like blaming the employee, like why not be a bit introspective and say, well, what conditions are we providing where people feel like they can't even disconnect for a training? That's I think a leadership or organizational challenge that and I don't want to blame this particular manager. She's a good person and she's really doing the best that she can, but it's again, how do we make choices in from the top knowing they're going to have a direct impact on the people below us? How do we really adapt to that and stay curious enough? What do the people need? So, or what do I need to do differently so that they can have better outcomes or a better experience and still get the work done?
Yeah. And what am I missing? Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. I mean, you've taught trauma informed,
Mhm.
practices just as much as I have. And, it's that thought of changing from what's wrong with you, what's wrong with that person, why are they acting like that, where we're assigning blame to what happened to that person, right?
Right.
Which what happened that would cause them to act in that way, which, you know, I'm sure if everything was equal and perfect and fair, they probably would not want to act that way,
Right.
right? With other people. And so that takes that intentional learning, right? That intentional understanding of I'm going away from what I'm perceiving. Because obviously, what she perceived was if that happened with her, she would be disrespected,
Right.
right? And so she's feeling that. And so whether you felt it or not, she was feeling that, right? Which is, you want me
Right.
to say something? I have authority, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm like, please don't, because I can only imagine if she had gone and said, "You all need to get off your laptops," I'm guaranteeing you that those people, and maybe this is an assumption on my part, would have been resentful for the rest of the training because they had higher priority things that they needed to focus on, and I would have been at that point wasting their time.
yeah,
They wouldn't have gotten
yeah,
any more information from
yeah,
me.
yeah,
And I keep try to keep that in mind. Training it is almost like a leadership position because you are trying to help people acquire new information, new knowledge, new skills. And they have to trust you. Like if you're not a trustable, I know trustable is not a real word, but I make up my own words. You'll be fluent in Tiffany's before you know it. But if you are not a trustworthy person or you don't build trust with your class, they're not going to take anything away from you. And then the whole experience was a waste of everybody's time. And
right,
so like you do have to be a model of the behavior. You do have to practice what you preach and, not just talk the talk, but walk the walk and build credibility. And if you don't do that, people aren't going to have a good experience and they're not going to, again, acquire new information, which is the whole point. And so
yeah,
I have to be really thoughtful of how I lead because that's going to have an impact on how people follow, which is
Yeah.
ultimately like the role of a leader is you go first and then people will follow you.
Yeah. It's when we're doing the virtual classes, I'm not, are you one of those who, it doesn't sound like you're one of the instructors who makes everyone keep their cameras on, right? And I'm
Absolutely
not like
not.
that either. Yeah. We both know a couple of instructors we work with who have to have the cameras on, right? I need to see everybody looking into the camera, right? And there's
Wow.
some programs that I work for that it's mandatory to receive credit for the training that you have your camera on, unless your laptop does not have a camera, um, or you're in a sensitive environment with stuff behind the walls that might be, violations of privacy or whatnot, right? So, but for me, you have your camera on, great. I love. It's great to see people engaged with their camera because I can see if they're with me, nodding their heads, right? I mean,
Right.
we both become body language experts, I'm sure by now.
Right. Right.
Right? And but if somebody else doesn't have a camera on, it's okay, right? There's probably some reason. And at the end of the day, me naturally being an introvert, you know, it, I don't if I don't have to have somebody staring at my big old head, the entire time, I might turn it off every now and then. I mean, so in fact, it becomes more self-conscious with me as I'm taking notes. I'm also looking to see if, you know, my my bald spot shows up. You know, if my beard is do I need to shave or anything else like that, right?
Right.
It becomes self-conscious. So having that camera off is not always the worst thing for me, and it helps me. I mean, when I first started training, we used to have aids. We'd have stuff for people to play with and squishy toys
Hmm.
and I used to travel with a bunch of race cars and put them on the tables and see managers pushing race cars back and forth to each other
How
and
funny.
things like that. Right. Just it but it got too loud. But I mean just things for people to fidget with, fidget spinners and things like that because adult learning theory says if you need to doodle to pay attention, then let people doodle.
Yeah.
Right. And so whatever it is that helps them feel more comfortable and even if it's those people in your class who they're just used to having their laptop open as they are working and hearing people, right? And like you said, that's a culture thing, right? As much as it is a personal preference, sometimes it's just constantly I need to be connected. I need to be
Yeah.
logged in because you never know, right?
Right.
And so that's something to be mindful about as well if your staff is doing that. But then again, with the way that technology is these days, people may be doing things that you don't even know. We're always yelling at my daughter, get off your phone, get off your phone. We used to do it all the time in high school, right? And she's always on her phone. She's always on her phone. Well, at the end of, I don't know, I think her
Hmm.
junior year, she showed us her phone on the app that she was writing short stories on, and she'd written 25,000 words,
Oh,
and
wow.
she had 100 people following her stories and giving comments and remarks on it, right?
Wow.
And which is great because my daughter has a auditory processing disorder that's similar to um, dyslexia.
Mhm.
So for her to feel comfortable expressing herself on this platform, and she did it all with her thumbs, right? I mean, it wasn't she had a laptop, but most of it was on her thumbs. So we don't always know. In fact, I had a senior leader of a state organization bring up a story in a class one time about one of his youngest manager, I guess was just a year or two out of college. And whenever they would meet online and have these conversations, she'd always be looking down. And so while people were talking, brainstorming, and she would always be the last to contribute or maybe wouldn't necessarily offer, a word. And so he said, I'm gonna catch her one time. And so when he asked a question, they all went around. He said, hey, so what do you think? And she said, oh, well, hold on, you guys should all be receiving my notes. I've just taken notes of everything you guys talked about. I did some research and looked up um, some of the programs, if it had been done before. I looked up, there's research papers there, there's infographics. You should all be receiving that in your email right now. And then I also gave a list of priorities of what I thought would be important to do. And so she had done all the after action that people would expect to do right there in the middle of the meeting. And he said that's the last time I ever questioned her about it. And you know, in my mind, that's not paying attention. But it also being a body language expert, when you see somebody doing this, you know, if you're not careful and you're not intentional in thinking what's happening to that person, it's what's wrong with that person. They're looking at their phone or they're paying attention to something else, right? And so, you know, it's all in our brains, man. It's
Hmm.
such a our brain is so interesting and so wonderful and so, you know, fraught.
Yeah. Yeah. We're good at making up stories. I
Oh,
tell you that. I don't know. That's why I try to leave people alone. Leave people alone, make it safe for them to participate or not. I never know what people have going on in their lives. They don't know what's going on in mine. We're not always in a place where it's appropriate to share those things, or is it any of my business or any of their business?
yeah,
I just really try to believe the best of people, that, people are doing the best they can with what they have. And sometimes that means that they're going to have to do some other stuff, and that has nothing to do with me. And I'm going to still, create an opportunity. And if they take it, great. And if they don't, maybe next time. Maybe it's not the right
yeah,
time. Um, but I definitely don't take it personal, nor do I try to blame people, because again, I honestly don't know what people are
yeah.
going through. And that's for them
Or,
to worry about.
or how they're learning, right? You know, I mean,
Exactly.
you know, when I first started, I used to think, you know, okay, well, people are engaged, they're asking questions, they're laughing, they're having a good time. Yeah, this is the best class. And then what I found in a lot of the engagement surveys or the after action surveys were some of the quietest classes, the ones that I learned so much and I was paying attention, and you know, and it's different audiences with different cultures and different ways of doing
Right.
things where, you know, I just if there's anything that I've really zeroed in on in the last couple of years, Tiff, it's
Mhm.
just I do not assume anything,
Right.
or
Because
at
you'll
least
be wrong.
I try not to assume anything because we
Right.
assume that's how our brain functions, right?
Yep.
Our brain likes to
Yep.
judge, like Renee Brown says, right? You know, but I try not to assume anything. If I have some type of assumption that people are going to do this, I'm saying, okay, so you have this assumption, but don't let that steer the way that you are approaching this class, this person,
Right.
anything else. It's all about discovery. And yeah, I think being, you know, doing as much coaching as I have the last couple of years really helps with that too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But
I think it all just comes down to like getting away from judging and judgment and the assumptions and the believe in everything you think and the stories we're telling ourselves, to really just moving into curiosity and really asking questions, being open minded, wanting to get more information, to ask other people. I think that comes from coaching as well, as that mindset of curiosity. And, it's never what you think. It very rarely, let me say that, it very rarely is what you think. And um, even in being curious, you may never get what you need to know, right? Depending on who you're talking to, they may share with you, they may not. Um, but at the end of the day, people are entitled to do what they feel is best for them. And, my role is to do the best I can for them. And if I get feedback that maybe I can do it differently or better or more effective in a later time, then I'm going to try to take that and put that into practice.
yeah,
Um, but I can't control every person's experience, you know, and I also want people to be accountable for their own experience, you know. At least for me as an instructor, when I'm teaching a class, one of the first things I try to set the tone is, if you ever have a question or an experience or something that relates to this and you want to share, let me know. You are experts too, and so I want to hear from you. And then sometimes at the end of a class, people will put like, I didn't feel like I had an opportunity to ask any questions. And I always like, kind of like, what can I do differently to invite? I don't get that comment often, but when I do, I almost feel like, what prevented you from asking that question? Because
mm,
I opened it up. I opened it up. I give lots of opportunities. What do you think? You know, how does this work? Would this work for you? What would this look like in your organization? How would you apply this to your job? And if people are not like being accountable for their own learning, then how do I adapt? again, I am curious, but if you're not sharing, I can't read your mind.
Right.
And so I don't take ownership of that. If you didn't ask a question, I can't take ownership of that. The only thing I can think of is how can I how can I help you feel more comfortable next time to ask those questions, right? How can
Yeah.
I create the environment for you where you do feel safe to ask that question that you feel like you didn't get a chance to ask? I want you to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, psychological safety is such a big
Mhm,
topic and something
mhm,
that a lot of people have been talking about. And
mhm.
yeah, and sometimes people, I mean, we can't always create that environment of psychological safety, right?
Right.
It's funny. I don't know about you, but I've had so many classes where people have said, "Oh, I wish my manager was here. I wish my
Mhm.
supervisor was here," or I wish my staff was here." And they would really get a lot out of it. And then you get the supervisor with the staff or the manager with the staff, and there's crickets,
Yes. Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
So that idea of psychological safety sometimes is outside of us, right?
Mhm,
And so,
mhm.
but then, I'm like you. I try to give everyone an opportunity to share. And so I'll do large group, but I'll also do smaller group
Mhm, mhm.
conversations, smaller group conversations. The rooms are always loud, always full. And so what'd you guys think? And nothing, right? Or very, or one or two people dominate the conversation, right? And so it's it's a tricky one. I've tried to learn not to take it personal if
Right.
people
Oh, I
don't
never
have a
do.
response. Yeah, but but I'm a big softie, so I'm a people pleaser. I want everyone to love me and everyone to do all these things correctly. If I don't if I don't see the response, sometimes the back of my brain will say, What's wrong with you?" Right? And so, like I said, I've had to intentionally say, "You've done this long enough where, you know, there might if there's something you said wrong or there's or there might be a different county, it might be a different group. Maybe we're not necessarily using the right, because I mean, like I said, I work with human service professionals, but I also work for financial service professionals. I work with different state organizations, right? And sometimes my stories, IT organizations, sometimes my stories don't 100% translate. And so I've learned to prepare and do my homework in that, and that idea of customer service and what are some of the common themes, that translate, but then also learning some lingo and some topics and sometimes just by asking them, how does this work for you? How does this, so it's yeah, it's psychological safety is definitely a tricky one. And I always intentionally try to say it's not always about you, but pay attention to see if there's something you can do. But at the end of the day, all you can do is the best you can do. I hear you.
It's funny that you say you're a people pleaser because I think I'm a people displeaser. Well, a part, like part of my style is to call
Mhm.
out against some of like the hypocrisy of the way that we operate, you know,
Yeah.
um, and to address some of the reality again, why real talk here, the reality of what we deal with and how we can, again, in a very theoretical way, say this is what we should be doing, or this is what like ideally we're doing, but we're not doing it. And so I want to call that out to create that discomfort. I try to do it in a humorous way so people don't feel like personally attacked. I don't want to do it in a way where, people feel bad, but I want them to be like, oh, does she work here? Does she does she in this happens here all the time? And then offer a solution or an alternative. Okay, this is what's happening. So now what? What's the next step? What do you want to be different? How do you want to do that? So, my goal is stir the pot and then sprinkle some glitter on it and then hope that people walk away with like at least an idea of what they can do differently. That's not dependent on what anybody else is doing, because a lot of the resistance I get, exactly how you described, like, oh, I wish my staff was here. I wish my supervisor was here. I wish my manager was here. And then when they all are all together, it's like, again, crickets. And that speaks volumes about how safe people feel in expressing themselves without fear of retribution
Reprisal.
or
Yeah.
discomfort or being blacklisted or all of the other reasons that people may not share. Um, I purposely try not to, and I don't think I ever have it like intentionally in any class, but I don't ask people their job titles. I
Hmm.
never ask people their job titles, not as part of an icebreaker. I don't make them write it down anywhere. Because for me, when we're all together, everybody's a learner. We're all learning. Where you fit on the
Yeah.
organizational chart is absolutely none of my business because everybody's equals in the training room. Um, and it's really funny because I treat everybody the same. And I don't really care what your job title is. It's irrelevant to me. And so I know like in one class I did many, many years ago, I always like pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. So this was pre-pandemic. I had a person in one of my classes that was just dominating every conversation, right? Because it was silent. It was you could hear the air conditioning budget buzzing because nobody wanted to talk. And so when I would, create those opportunities for that group involvement, um, it would just be that one person who always was the first to jump in and share her perspective. And she had a great perspective. I'm not mad at her for volunteering, but it wasn't leaving much space for anybody else to share. And so I went to her on our break and I said, "Hey, I want to just say thank you for being so open and thank you for always being willing to be the first one to speak. I'm wondering though, for the rest of the day, if you would just let it be silent for a little bit so we can get some other perspectives. It's not that I don't value what you're saying, but I really would like other people to have an opportunity to speak up." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, no problem. Thank you so much." And so we went the rest of the day. People started to warm up and started to talk. She stayed engaged but didn't dominate. And so at the very, very end of the class, she comes up to me. She says, "Do you know who I am?" And I said, "Yeah, your name is," I won't say it here to keep it anonymous. And she's like, "No, no, but do you know who I am here?" And I said, "No." She's like, "Oh, I'm the director." I said, "Oh, good." And she's like, "I just wanted to say thank you for shutting me up. I wanted to say I really appreciated the way that you came and asked me to let other people talk because sometimes as a leader I forget that I need to do more listening than speaking, and I just really appreciated that you gave me a chance to do that." And I said, "Oh no, you're welcome." And I don't would I have reacted differently if I knew she was the director? I'd like to say no, but who knows? You
Yeah.
know, who knows what my brain would have told me if I had known she was the boss of everybody. But um she, as a leader, she is, and I know her now, I have a relationship with her now. She is one who wants to hear from other people. She
Mhm.
is a person who's interested in what other people think and what they have to say and wants collaboration and participation. But sometimes leaders have to know that with what they're doing, they may not be getting those results because of them, and they've got to adapt and change.
And
Which
that's so
might be,
funny.
oh, go ahead,
That's,
Carl. Sorry.
no, 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 go
I would
ahead.
say, which might be a great segue into our topic today about the different types of leaders. But
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. And yeah, the different types of leaders we have, but it's a conversation I think probably for another day, right? But just the
yeah,
idea of, especially as much experience as we have working and training
yeah,
in government agencies, just that understanding of authority and the hierarchical culture that sometimes breeds that don't speak until the person above you've spoken, but it's just, it's everybody has somebody they respond to or they report to.